Hello, YouTube. I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney, and it's going to sound like I'm trying to spew for the views, right? I'm going to be talking about a current event, not because of the current event, but because of the Twitter rage storm that came after it. And we'll give the caveat: Twitter is not, in my view, a useful social network. It is generally one where the loudest and most extreme opinions are amplified, and of course, the voices of reason are minimized, in my opinion. So I come to this with a certain prejudice against the platform of Twitter, which is of course a platform of 2004 that is still alive today in 2022, and has not aged particularly well, in my opinion. So last night there was like an award ceremony for movies or something like that, and Chris Rock was hosting. And apparently, Chris Rock made a joke about the actress, or actor, I guess I should say, uh, Jada Pinkett Smith, who apparently suffers from alopecia, which is an immune disorder that can cause discoloration of the skin. And I guess the joke, which I did not hear, touched upon the medical condition of alopecia. And then there was some drama, perhaps orchestrated, perhaps not, who cares, where an actor from my youth, Will Smith, who I grew up watching his show, um, he's apparently married to Jada Pinkett Smith. He got up and slapped Chris Rock, and then in a very strange way, like screamed, like, "Keep my wife's name out of your mouth." And it was all bizarre, and I assume some attempt to stay relevant. But today, the day after all of that went down, there's a lot of fury on the Twitters um, about Chris Rock making an ableist joke. And apparently, the idea here is that um, the joke about alopecia is directed at a disability. Now, the question of what is and is not a disability in common parlance is outside the scope of my expertise. I'm not um, I'm not a person dealing with a disability, nor am I a person heavily educated in helping those with disabilities. So I think if I was to weigh in on what is and is not a disability in everyday life, be something of a jerk. Just never stopped me before, but here it will. I just don't feel like being a jerk today, or coming off especially ignorant. Now, which I'm sure some of you will say that I am doing, anyways. Um, but what I can talk about is the Americans with Disabilities Act as pertains to employment, because I'm an employment attorney, right? And the Americans with Disabilities Act would define a disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more life activities. Now, alopecia is an immune condition, but generally it is not an immune condition that causes its uh, sufferer to be in poor health. It's an immune condition that causes this discoloration, but that is often the only symptom. Certainly, not all cases. There are fringe cases, and we might look at this and saying, okay, well, if alopecia is making it so you can't, if your immune condition is so serious that you're having trouble getting vaccines or you can't go out during a pandemic, well, that's certainly going to be a disability because it's impairing a life activity, right? But a more run-of-the-mill diagnosis of alopecia, where there is skin discoloration, but otherwise the individual is in good health, there's a question as to whether or not that is classified as a disability under the ADA, because, well, people raise the question of, does a skin discoloration impair a life activity, right? We've got the first part. It's definitely a physical impairment, right? There's no question. But does it substantially limit one or more major life activities? Now, I think people are going to make the argument that physical appearance matters, and it can shake your confidence and be very difficult for you, and all of these things are true fundamentally, right? And that is probably the only argument I can see for classifying alopecia as a disability under the ADA. Although I will note, probably not one that would require an accommodation in the workplace, right? But that being said, that is the argument I think that I would make to say that alopecia is a disability under the ADA. Pardon me. The counter argument is that you can still do all the things, right? You can go out, you can work, you can play, you can have fun, you can play soccer, you can drive a car. There's really nothing that I do today that I couldn't do tomorrow. Well, I guess I'm not a great example, but if we have a hypothetical human who is normal one day and doing everything, and then through some miracle is suffering from alopecia the next day, right? Is that person's life impaired? Does any major life activity need to halt? And I think people would think, oh, well, it's harder if you have a sales job, maybe appearance matters, things of that nature. And I would say that is probably not how I feel about it. I think that if somebody is not doing business with you because of a coloration issue, the problem is probably with that person, not your medical condition, right? Like, I don't know if that would qualify as an impairment for our purposes. This is a tough one to some extent because the ableist faction are going to be mad saying, oh, you said it's not a disability. Well, again, no, I said the ADA may not find it to be a disability. I'm not saying it's not a disability. It is clearly a difficult medical condition to have, right? There's no question to my mind. But a very erudite law librarian kind of pointed this out to me on Twitter and said, hey, you should weigh in. And I don't have Twitter, so I said, I'd rather not. But yeah, I mean, I guess if you're shying away from simple application of a statute to a definition on YouTube, maybe you shouldn't have a YouTube channel, right? Like, all I'm really doing is saying this is what the law requires to define something as a disability, and does this medical condition qualify, right? And I guess I just came to the conclusion, like, if I'm too shy to do that, probably ought to shut the channel down. So anyways, like and subscribe if this was helpful to you. I think it will be helpful to very few people because it's really just a discussion of a Twitter spat between folks. And I'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone.